Not up close, he played for nearly 2 decades. Only 2 players have caught more Major League games. Former All-Star and Gold Glove catcher Gary Carter discusses his career from Montreal to New York. Plus, his insight on the best players behind the plate today and his thoughts on the amazing home run show being staged at a ballpark near you. Up Close is up next.
From the ESPN studios in Los Angeles, here's Chris Myers.
Hi, and welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us. Some people, they complain about sitting behind a desk all day when they're working on their job. But what if you had to crouch behind home plate day in, day out for 18 years? Well, that's what Gary Carter did, and seemed to be enjoying it all along the way. We welcome the former All-Star catcher to the show. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Chris.
And now in your second year as a broadcaster with the Expos, the team that in the major leagues you came up with. You worked with the Marlins before that, so not only having played the game, you see it as a broadcaster. And the home run craze that's going on, what's your take on we might have 4 or 5 guys hit 50 or more home runs this season when we've only had 15 before in the history of the game.
Well, it's exciting, I think, for baseball, and it's great to see the fans get caught up in the McGwire-Sosa race, and obviously Ken Griffey Jr. has come on, and then there's Greg Vaughn from San Diego, but it's been an exciting year for baseball to see all of this transpire. In Chicago, especially with Sammy Sosa, and the fact that they've got a chance to win the wild card.
Would you have a theory on why we're seeing this kind of power? You know, we talked about the ball being livelier before, pitching being diluted. Are the players bigger and stronger? What are the reasons? I
think there's a combination of maybe a little bit of a delusion of pitching because of expansion and a number of things, but I do really believe, and I really attribute to the success of the players because they are bigger, stronger, faster. They've got all these different kinds of weights to work with, supplements to make them bigger and stronger, the creatine, the androdiastine, and all these
whatever they want to. Now, did you ever use any of that when you played?
No, I didn't.
Was it available?
No, not
back then.
No,
not really.
No.
And do you think it taints at all what somebody like a McGwire and the players today are doing?
I don't think it taints it at all, and because it's legal in baseball, maybe it isn't in a couple of other sports, you still have to swing the bat and hit the ball. So I admire Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, even Ken Griffey Jr., and all the rest of them that have had successful home run seasons. You got to appreciate that. I mean, this is what baseball needed, was to get caught up in something like this.
You were a guy who was always friendly with the media, win or lose, no matter what team you were with. When McGwire earlier seemed to feel suffocated, he even said he felt like a caged animal, and the pressure that obviously he had to deal with of just being expected to hit a home run even in batting practice. How much does that weigh on a guy? And obviously it hasn't kept him from doing what he wants to do.
Exactly, and I tell you, I appreciate what Mark McGwire has gone through, even Sammy now, but I think there's a different way of approaching it. The press that would hit and inundate Mark early on because his home run ratio and success was much better early on than Sammy's, and Sammy's just having a great time with it. He's just happy to be a part of it and getting caught up into it. But a guy like Mark McGwire, he's a very serious type, and he appreciates what he has accomplished and all, but I mean, as far as the inundation by the press, it can become overwhelming. And to me, I just dealt with it, but I think for Mark to have it happen on an everyday basis, and then the fans that come out in droves to watch him even take batting practice, that's something that might be a little bit too much pressure on someone, but he's handled it very diplomatically.
Yeah, I mean, we might have both of them break the record. Now, if you were out there and caught the ball, you're used to catching the ball behind the home plate, what would you do if you caught home run number 62?
Well, I'm a collector myself, Chris. You know, I've got quite a bit of memorabilia, and I've got like 40 years worth of baseball cards and all, and I would love to be a part of that. And
so you wouldn't sell it?
I wouldn't sell it at all, and I think for Mark's sake, I think he's already made acknowledgement to this that he wouldn't pay anything for it, and I can appreciate that. But, I mean, that's quite a record. It's held up since 1961, and it could be broken, like you said, by not only one, but maybe two. And the fact that somebody already put a price tag on Mark's 50th home run at Shea Stadium and put a price tag of $10,000, I don't know if the fan accepted it, but this 62nd home run could be worth as much as $250,000. So, I mean, that just blows you away to think of what the memorabilia craze has done for some of these items. And Mark says, just let me hit him and not worry about what kind of cost would come with it.
Now, eventually it all landed in Cooperstown. Now, let's talk about some of the other things this year in baseball. Okay. Roger Clemens, 3,000 strikeouts. Barry Bonds, first player to 400 home runs, 400 stolen bases in his career. Kerry Woods, 20 strikeouts. Have these things been somewhat overshadowed by the McGwire-Sosa-Griffey home run chase? And why is the home run the thing on the minds of baseball fans?
Probably because the home run thing has been talked about, but whether or not somebody could accomplish it, and I think that's because the media has built it up as high as it is. But I think those other accomplishments, like you mentioned, Clemens's 3,000 strikeouts, not too often are you going to see guys reach that plateau. And then Barry Bonds' 400 stolen bases and 400 home runs. Nobody ever in the history of the game has accomplished that, and this home run thing really has overshadowed that. So I think that because it's been a long-standing thing, and the fact of Roger Maris, what he went through to try and break Babe Ruth's record, and all the pressures that came on him, that's probably why it's been so highlighted.
And speaking of Roger Maris, and fans recall that at the time the country was rooting for Mantle to win that home run battle, not somebody like Roger Maris. And in a sense, and recent polls showed that most of the country is rooting for McGwire over Sammy Sosa. What's your take on that?
Well, it doesn't matter really who does it. I mean, it would be great to see both of them do it, and it's going to be a battle to see who gets that 60-second home run as far as the fans' standpoint. But I think Mark, because he's so big of stature, and you look at his arms, and he's got a T-shirt that says something like, Popeye, you can have these forearms back after the season, or something of that nature. And Sammy Sosa's more of a fun-loving guy, and he's very giving to his home country and the Dominican, and a number of things, and I think it's just the relationship that the fans have had going out to see some of these awesome home runs that he can hit in batting practice, and I think that's the reason why maybe more people are pulling for Mark than for Sammy.
Yeah, and McGwire's led the home run race most of the way. Both of these guys, though, as gamers. I mean, they love baseball, much like you were, Gary Carter. We'll continue with Gary Carter, the Kid, also his other nickname, but truly a gamer. We'll talk about his style of play. He had 32 home runs in a season. That was his high for 1 year, but this is career number 300 as he played over 18 seasons in the major leagues and put up over 324 home runs. We'll be back with Gary Carter up close.
Nothing's tougher.
You by Castrol Syntex, the active lubricant.
Welcome back to Up Close. Thanks for staying with us. We're talking with Gary Carter, 11-time All-Star, over 2,000 games caught. Only Carlton Fisk and Bob Boone have more Major League games behind the plate. In your career, you were Mr. Expo, a kid from California starting with the Montreal Expos, and for a decade played there. And I know that you really dove into it, right? You tried to live year-round, tried to speak a little French, and fit into the organization. Right. What was that adjustment period like for you?
Well, I never imagined what it was going to be like. In school, I took Spanish to learn that because we were so close to the Mexican border, never thinking that I would have to try to learn how to speak some French. But when my wife and I went up there, we thought we would take full advantage of the opportunity, and we got involved in the community. I took a Berlitz course, tried to learn how to
do those
enunciate.
Work, by the way?
They do.
Yes.
They really do. It really did help me,
give
Chris.
us a little French. What can you say in French?
Oh, bonsoir, mesdames, messieurs, Jean le table d'honneur et invité distingué.
Is that something off a menu or what?
No, it's good evening, ladies and gentlemen, people of the head table, and distinguished guests. That's all that says.
Oh, so you've done the speaking circuit lately.
A little bit. But
that's all you got out of that course all these years?
No. I learned how to enunciate some words and all, and then I pick it up talking with some of the French sports writers and things like that. But I can't really speak it fluently. I pick up words. I can read some of the French newspapers and pick out some of the words, but for the most part, I cannot speak it fluently, and I don't have the opportunity to really use it.
But the message is that the effort was there, and I think the fans saw that, and that was always your style, nicknamed the Kid, but also very, very much a gamer. I mean, going all out all the time, whatever the score was, whatever the conditions, and I think that the fans really, that's what endeared you to them.
I think so, and I just always felt, Chris, that I was blessed with an ability to play the great game of baseball, and I just tried to go out there and play it that way, and I can't believe that I played 18 years because it went by like that, and I've been out of it now for 6 years. I broadcasted for the Marlins for 4 years, and now 2 years with the Expos, but I just enjoyed the game. I had a passion for the game, and I think that's maybe what's lacking a little bit of today, but I still see a lot of guys going out there and playing.
Yeah, who's a gamer today? Who reminds you of you when you watch somebody play? Not necessarily a catcher, but just the style, the passion.
Well, obviously you got to admire Cal Ripken Jr., and for his number of games consistently that he plays. But there's a number of guys. I like Scotty Rowland from Philadelphia.
Okay,
I like the way he plays hard. And some guys on the Expos. You got to love F.P. Santangelo, the way he gets dirty.
Right.
And I love this Vladimir Guerrero. This young man is really going to be something. And Brad Fulmer, he likes to get down
and dirty. California kid.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's a number of great players that are out there of today that do play the game hard. And, of course, a guy that played the same style, I appreciate seeing that.
And you still have that passion. You said when you were traded after 10 years from the Expos to the New York Mets, the saddest day of your life.
At that time, yeah, Chris, I mean, at that time it did, because I thought I was going to be a part of the same organization for my entire career, but it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I was thrown into a situation where we had an opportunity to maybe win a World Series.
Right.
And I think that's everyone's dream playing a team sport, is to play ultimately on a World Series team that, you know, wins. Like Roger Clemens, that's all he wants to do is get that World Series ring.
That '86, you were there. I mean, when you had that of course, that infamous moment for the Red Sox, but for the Mets, it gave you the life to win in 7 games. What is your memory of that moment?
The biggest memory, obviously, was the ball that went through Bill Buckner's legs. That was talked about the most, and that led to our victory in Game 6. But the dramatic way in which we came back, also that league championship series against a very tough Houston Astro team, and once we got over that hurdle, we might have been so exhausted that the first 2 games we lost at Shea Stadium. Then we came back and won games 3 and 4 at Fenway, but Game 6 was probably the most dramatic. And when we had that momentum, Chris, we felt that it didn't matter, because we were down 3-0 in Game 7 after 5 innings, and we came back and won that game 8-5.
Yeah, in that World Series, you had 2 home runs, nine runs batted in, and talk about delivering in the clutch, or finally getting to this moment and being able to perform, not just showing up here.
Well, to me, it was like a dream come true. As a kid growing up, you always visualize and dream of those situations, and all I could think about, especially when I came up in the bottom of the 10th inning with 2 outs, and I just envisioned myself being up there. I really felt the presence, that God was really right there helping me swing that bat, but started the rally off of Calvin Schiraldi, and those are the things you dream of. Bottom of the 9th inning, bases loaded, and here I am facing Sandy Koufax or something. And I mean, I was a kid growing up in Southern California. That was the thing that everybody thought of. It was to play ultimately in a World Series. So for it to happen and then ultimately winning, without a doubt, it's the greatest thrill of my career.
Yeah, you've been able to really realize your dreams, and then we have to take a break. But coming back, I want you to just comment on Montreal. You said it was said it worked out. You came back and were able, after stops with the Giants and the Dodgers, to at least finish up in Montreal, where it all began. Why was that so important to you?
Well, it was nice to be able to go back to the team with which I had started, and I spent 12 and a half years in the organization, 2.5 in the minor leagues, the first 10, and they brought me back for my final year. And I knew that it was my skills were diminishing, and I was getting, my knees were bothering me and everything else, that it was a good way to finish off my career.
Are the current Expos in jeopardy of moving, whether there's a new stadium or not? We constantly see superstars on the rise have to be shipped out of Montreal because they can't afford them. I mean, obviously you cover the organization now. Is this a realistic possibility that they will move?
There's a very good possibility of it, Chris. It would be a very disheartening day if that happens, and I hope and pray that something can happen, that they can work together with the public and come up with enough ticket sales to sell all the luxury boxes and the seats, and then maybe the government might get involved as well. But they really feel that they need a new stadium. Is there
any question that Major League Baseball belongs in Montreal and can survive there, should survive there?
I think it can survive. Obviously, in comparison to what Toronto has, it's much more Americanized, and I don't know if there's people that really, or players that complain because of all the things you have to go through, the transition of the monies and the customs and the tax implications and so forth and so on. But I really believe that there's true fans of the sport up there. I mean, obviously very much more hockey oriented, but I think they do love baseball. They just would love to see a winner, and it's never happened there. The only so-called feather we have in the hat up there was from 1981, when we did play that league championship series after the strike and then lost out to the Dodgers. That's the closest that the Expos came to going to a world championship.
All right, we'll continue with Gary Carter. He got his world championship in New York, as he spoke about. We'll talk to him about the catchers of today, some of the best all around. Also, his Hall of Fame thoughts, and maybe who's the best offensive catcher of all time. We'll be back here on Up Close right before Sports Center at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific, Monday through Friday. And on Thursday, we'll go Up Close with Jeff George, much maligned quarterback for the Raiders. Can he turn them around this season? They open against the Chiefs Sunday night. And then on Friday, we'll harken back to the old days of hoops with Hall of Famer John Havlicek. When we come back, we'll talk more baseball with Gary Carter, his Met days, and what advice he has for Mike Piazza playing. Talking with Gary Carter, three-time Gold Glove Award winner, who started with Montreal, finished up with the Montreal as he spoke about. But you had that time with New York in '85 after the trade. We talked about how you were saddened at first. This is opening day when you step up there in front of the home fans and hit the game-winning homer. And from that point on, Met fans just loved Gary Carter. It was like the Expo attachment to you.
Yeah, and it's like it endeared me to the fans right away, and I'll never forget them leaving Shea Stadium chanting Gary, Gary, and it was a great feeling, Chris. And even though of being upset of being traded from Montreal, because nobody likes to be traded or look differently to, going to New York was the best thing that could have happened.
Some guys don't. They think that's too much. They can't handle that. The big pressure. But you did. Why so?
I guess I just welcomed it because I knew there was a great opportunity for us to win. And going to New York, I knew the media hype and everything, especially with what Mike Piazza's had to go through and all. And I appreciate that because I know what it was like for me. I
mean, he's a guy who's already heard the boos there after when he first got there the first week. And, of course, the size of the contract, people questioning that. Do you think he's going to stay in New York, or do you think it's already a done deal that he won't be back there?
I don't know. That's hard to say. It depends on what kind of monies that they eventually do finally come up with. But I think, Mike, there was a lot of expectations. Obviously, he was LA's golden boy here, traded to the Marlins for about a week's time, then comes to New York with a lot of fanfare. And I think the fans were a little disappointed that they didn't get that total impact right away. He's now produced since then, and he's made some great hits and is really helping them to try and win that wild card. But all in all, I think he's been disappointed with what has transpired initially with the fans and even maybe some of the media members.
Probably the best thing for him overall would have been if he had never left the Dodgers. You agree? I mean, if he'd been able to work something out.
I totally agree. I was very surprised that all transpired the way it did. I thought he was greatly suited for out here. I mean, he had soap operas that he was going to be on. He was going to be a future actor, I guess, in Hollywood. And here all the great statistics he's put up. I mean, he might very well be the greatest hitting catcher of all time.
Certainly. Wow, if you're right about it. How about the best, if we talk about catchers today, we think we know the answer on this one, but best all around, combining the hitting and the defense?
To me, no doubt, it's got to be Pudge Rodriguez. I think he is the total package. He is as quick as anybody I've ever seen as far as getting rid of the ball, getting it down. Look at that. I mean, there was plenty of time for Kevin Elster to lay the tag on it, and he just seems to be able to do all the right thing. He blocks balls well. He blocks plate pretty well. And everything that he does is the total package because he also hits. He doesn't maybe hit with power or drive in the runs like Mike Piazza does, but when you're looking for an overall talent behind the plate, it's got to be Pudge.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Jason Kendall, the Pirates on the rise. And then you saw when you were down in Florida doing the Marlins broadcast up close, Charles Johnson, and although his hitting needs some work defensively, it's as good as it gets.
No question about it, and winning the Gold Glove in his first 3 years and all. I see the total package there, too, if he can combine with the hitting. But I think that fundamentally, and the mechanics are right there for Charles Johnson as being one of the best defensive catchers going right now. Jason Kendall, he's improved on his defense, and what a year he's had offensively, and he's impressed a lot of people as well. But really, overall, you look at the both leagues and all, it's got to be Pudge.
All right, we're continuing with Gary Carter. Only 11 catchers, by the way, in the Hall of Fame. Johnny Bench, the last, or the only one to go in on the first vote. We'll talk about Gary Carter's shot. He had a chance. He still has a chance, and one day probably will be in the Hall. We'll talk to him about that in a moment. This was the first year of Hall of Fame eligibility for our guest, Gary Carter, and as we said, 11 catchers in the Hall. Johnny Bench, the only one to go in on his first try. You received 200 votes. Of course, Don Sutton went into the Hall of Fame, and Carlton Fisk comes up next year.
Right.
Did you think that you were going to get in on the first try?
Realistically, probably not, Chris, just because of the way the votes have broken down in recent years, and Johnny being recognized as probably the greatest of all time.
And someone who has spoken very highly of you and your abilities over
Which I've always appreciated, and I mean, he befriended me my first year in the big leagues in 1975, but when you look at the complete package, Johnny Bench was it. I mean, 10 Gold Gloves, and look at the home runs that he accomplished, 2 MVPs and all. So when you think about the greatest catcher, you all of a sudden talk about Johnny Bench.
What about you? Do you deserve to be? And I think you do. And I'm not just saying that here, but I want to know what you think the criteria should be.
Well, what I was told, how well you did, or were you dominant at your position for a period of time, which usually is over the course of about 10 years, a decade. And for that period of time, when Johnny pretty much hung up the shin guards and all, from that point, during the 80s, I was basically known as the guy for the 80s. But there was also Carlton Fisk over in the American League, and comparatively, for that period of time, home runs and RBIs per year, average-wise, I was still the guy. But here again, it's going to just be interesting to see.
Actually, Carlton, he played till he was what, 40?
45.
45, and you're 44
now, and I just can't even imagine. And so he's going to be recognized, too, also for longevity, just like how Don Sutton went in of his longevity. And accomplishing, and Phil Necro and guys like that.
I mean, I think winning a World Series helps, or having been on a World Series winner. Right. I mean, for a while you were in Montreal where you didn't get a lot of publicity or a lot of attention. How important is it for you, Gary, to make it to the Hall of Fame?
Importance is just simply it's a gratification that comes with it. It's like an icing on the cake. Thinking of the accomplishments, all the wear and tear. I mean, all the knee surgeries and broken thumbs and things like that. And I think about the years of dedication and the love and passion for the game. So to me, it would just be the greatest thrill and accomplishment of my lifetime, and so that's why it would cap off everything.
Speaking of a cap, real quick, if you get in, Mets or Expos?
Well, that's determined. Depends on really if the Expos stay, but right now it probably would be with the Expos. They retired my number and the number of years I played up there.
Yeah, all right. Appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for coming by and saying hi. It was a lot of fun having you. We appreciate Gary Carter joining us here on Up Close, and hope you'll be with us Thursday. Raider quarterback Jeff George, John Havlicek later in the week. Stick around. SportsCenter is coming up next.